The silence in the Galactic Council chambers was heavy with despair. Ambassador Zethka of the Vorthok Empire stood before the assembled representatives, his forearms trembling as he held the datapad containing their planet's final medical reports. His species had ruled this sector for over 2,000 years, but now they faced complete extinction. The plague has spread to 97% of our population, Zethka announced, his voice barely above a whisper. Our remaining medical facilities estimate 6 months before total species collapse. We have exhausted all known treatments, consulted every medical database in the galaxy, and sought aid from 14 different civilizations. He paused, his breathing apparatus wheezing. No one can help us. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The crystalline hierarchy representative Shard Prime Luxian spoke first. The Vorthak have been our allies for centuries. If our combined knowledge cannot solve this biological crisis, then perhaps it is simply the natural order asserting itself. Murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The plague that ravaged the Vorthak homeworld was unlike anything seen before. It attacked their unique cellular structure, breaking down the symbiotic relationship between their dual nervous systems. Every major medical facility in the galaxy had declared it incurable. Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Diplomatic Corps sat quietly in the observer section. Humans had only recently been granted limited observer status in the Galactic Council, and most species still viewed them as primitive newcomers. She watched Zethka's presentation with growing concern, taking detailed notes on her tablet. The hegemony of Kaz representative, a tall insectoid being called Click-Thane Mordex, stood next. While we sympathize with the Vorthak's plight, we must consider resource allocation practically. The plague is contained to their system. Quarantine protocols are in place. Perhaps it would be more efficient to focus on preserving their cultural records and relocating any remaining healthy populations to reservation worlds. Sarah felt her jaw clench. She had seen this before. The cold calculation that passed for compassion among many galactic species. They were already writing off an entire civilization as the acceptable loss. Zethka's eyes, usually bright amber, had dimmed to a sickly yellow. We understand the practical considerations. The Vorthak people have lived with honor for millennia. We will face extinction with the same dignity. We ask only that the Council remember us favorably in the historical records. That can be arranged, confirmed the Council Secretary, a multi-tentacled being from the consensus worlds. All Vorthak cultural achievements will be properly archived. Their contribution to galactic civilization will not be forgotten. As the formal procedures began for what amounted to a species funeral, Sarah stood up. The action was so unexpected that the entire chamber fell silent. Observer species rarely spoke during council sessions, and humans had never addressed the full assembly. With respect to the council, Sarah began, her clear voice carrying across the chamber. I believe there may be another option. Shard Prime Luxian's crystal body flashed with irritation. Observer Chen, this is highly irregular. The Terran Republic has observer status only. You do not have speaking privileges during formal sessions. Sarah smiled politely but didn't sit down. I'm not speaking as a Terran Republic representative. I'm speaking as a doctor. This caused a stir among the assembled delegates. Most species in the galaxy viewed humans as barely civilized, good perhaps for manual labor or basic military service, but certainly not for advanced medical work. Council Chairman Vex Prime Corlith, an ancient being from the first civilization, raised one of his 6 hands for silence. You claim medical expertise, young human. What credentials do you possess that our finest medical minds lack? I'm a xenobiologist and infectious disease specialist, Sarah replied. I've spent the last 15 years studying cross-species pathology. While I may not have the advanced degrees of your medical institutions, I do have something they might lack, a fresh perspective. Zethka looked at her with something that might have been hope. You believe you can help where others have failed? I believe every problem has a solution, Sarah said firmly. Sometimes it just takes looking at things differently. The Vorthak plague attacks the symbiotic relationship between your dual nervous systems, correct? Yes, Zethka confirmed. It severs the bioneural pathways that allow our 2 brain centers to communicate. Without this connection, Our bodies enter systemic failure. Sarah nodded, already thinking. On Earth, we have a saying. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. It means look for common solutions before exotic ones. Everyone has been treating this as a unique alien plague, but what if it's something simpler? The chamber erupted in derisive sounds from multiple species. Clickthane Mordex clicked his mandibles dismissively. Primitive human, do you truly believe your basic understanding can surpass the collective knowledge of galactic civilization? Sarah's expression hardened. I believe that sometimes being an outsider gives you advantages. You've all been thinking inside the same box. I'd like permission to examine the medical data and visit the affected worlds. Council Chairman Corlith leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying her carefully. You understand the risks, human? The plague is contained but lethal, and if you fail, it will be seen as a failure of your entire species. If I succeed, will humanity be granted full council membership? The question caught everyone off guard. Even Zethka looked surprised at her boldness. That is presumptuous, Shard Prime Luxian said coldly. But fair, Sarah replied. If a primitive human can solve a problem that stumped your best minds, doesn't that prove we belong here as equals? The chamber fell into tense silence. After several minutes of whispered consultation among the senior members, Chairman Corlith spoke. Very well. You will have access to all medical data and permission to visit the quarantined worlds. But understand this. Failure will result in your quarantine and probable death, and it will end any hopes of Terran advancement in the Council. Sarah nodded solemnly. I understand the stakes. As the session adjourned, Zethka approached her. His movements were slow, labored. The plague was affecting him too. Why? He asked simply. Why risk everything for a species you barely know? Sarah looked into his dimming eyes and saw something familiar. The desperate hope of someone watching their loved ones die. She had seen it in too many human faces during her career. Because that's what we do, she said quietly. Humans don't give up on people. Even when everyone else has written them off, we keep fighting. It's not always smart, it's not always practical, but it's who we are. Zethka studied her for a long moment. I pray to the ancestors that you succeed, Dr. Chen. Not just for my people, but for yours as well. You have made enemies today with your boldness, Sarah smiled grimly. Wouldn't be the first time. Now, let's go save your species. As they left the council chambers together, neither of them noticed the subtle communications being sent between certain council members. Sarah's challenge had indeed made enemies, and there were those who would prefer to see humanity fail spectacularly, rather than succeed where they had not. The real test was just beginning. The Vorthak homeworld of Zelthera hung before them like a dying jewel, its once brilliant blue oceans now murky with the byproducts of planetary decay. Sarah stared through the viewport of the medical transport ship as they approached the quarantine zone, her hand steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. The planetary medical facilities are operating at minimal capacity, reported Dr. Kestul, the Vorthak chief medical officer, who had volunteered to accompany her. His condition was worse than Zethka's, with visible lesions where the plague had begun breaking down his bioneural connections. Most of our medical staff have succumbed to the plague. Those remaining are in various stages of infection. Sarah nodded, reviewing the data streams on her tablet. How long do you have personally? 3 weeks, perhaps less, Kestul replied, matter-of-factly. The plague progresses faster in medical professionals. We theorize it may be triggered by stress or prolonged exposure to infected patients. That's actually useful information, Sarah murmured, making notes. Stress-triggered acceleration suggests the plague might be affecting your immune response mechanisms, not just your nervous systems. The transport ship shuddered as they entered the planet's atmosphere. The human pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Torres, called back from the cockpit. Doc, we're getting some weird readings. The planet's electromagnetic field is fluctuating in patterns I've never seen before. Sarah unbuckled and moved forward to look at the readings. The electromagnetic signatures were indeed unusual, rhythmic pulses that seemed almost organic in nature. Kesthul, have these field fluctuations always existed on Zelthara? No, the Vorthak doctor replied, his voice strained. They began approximately 6 months ago, shortly before the first plague cases appeared. We assumed they were related to solar storm activity. Show me the correlation data, Sarah requested, her mind already working through possibilities. As they descended toward the planet's primary medical facility, Sarah studied the electromagnetic readings alongside the plague progression charts. A pattern was emerging that made her pulse quicken with possibility. The field fluctuations weren't random. They followed a specific frequency that seemed to match the bioneural communication patterns of healthy Vorthak. The medical facility they landed at was a testament to Vorthak architectural beauty, with flowing organic curves that seemed to grow from the earth itself. But now it looked more like a mausoleum. The few remaining staff moved slowly through corridors that should have been bustling with activity. Dr. Health 9, the facility's senior researcher, met them at the entrance. Her once proud bearing was now stooped with exhaustion and illness. Dr. Chen, I must ask, what makes you believe you can succeed where we have failed? We have tried every treatment protocol known to galactic medicine. Sarah followed her through the eerily quiet corridors, past wards filled with suffering Vorthak in various stages of neural system breakdown. Sometimes the best solutions come from the simplest observations. Tell me, when did you first notice the electromagnetic field changes? About 6 months ago, Health 9 confirmed, but extensive testing showed no correlation with the plague's onset. What kind of testing? Sarah asked. We analyzed the field strength, frequency patterns, potential radiation effects. All were within normal parameters for planetary electromagnetic phenomena. Sarah stopped walking. But did anyone test whether the fields were interfering with your bioneural communications? Health 9 looked confused. Why would we? Our bioneural systems evolved with the planet's natural electromagnetic environment. They're perfectly adapted to it. But what if the environment changed in a way your systems weren't adapted to handle? They entered the main research laboratory, where banks of computers displayed endless streams of medical data. Sarah immediately began pulling up the electromagnetic field data alongside the bioneural pattern charts for healthy and infected Vorthak. Lieutenant Torres, she called to the human pilot who had followed them in. You mentioned the electromagnetic. Readings looked organic. Can you elaborate? Marcus studied the displays. Well, I'm not a scientist, but back home we've got similar patterns when large groups of electronics interfere with each other, like when too many devices try to communicate on the same frequency. Sarah's eyes widened. That's it. Show me the population density maps for when the plague first appeared. Health 9 pulled up the data, her movements becoming more animated as she began to understand Sarah's line of thinking. The first cases appeared in our most populated cities, where the concentration of Vorthak bioneural communications would be highest. Sarah added, your dual nervous systems don't just communicate within individual bodies. They create a kind of electromagnetic field that extends beyond you. In small groups, this isn't a problem. But when millions of Vorthak live close together, the Yao field interference becomes strong enough to disrupt individual bioneural connections. Kesthul finished, his voice filled with growing excitement despite his weakening condition. Sarah nodded rapidly. The plague isn't a biological infection at all. It's electromagnetic interference caused by your own population density reaching a critical threshold. Your bioneural systems are essentially jamming each other. Health 9 stared at the data displays with new understanding. But if that's true, why didn't we detect this sooner? We've had large cities for centuries. Because the interference effect is cumulative and has a lag time, Sarah explained. It builds up slowly until it reaches a tipping point. Once that happens, it cascades rapidly through the population. The stress response Lieutenant Torres mentioned accelerates it. When Vorthak become worried about the plague, their bioneural activity increases, making the interference worse. Dr. Kesthul slumped against a wall, but there was hope in his dimming eyes for the first time in months. If you're correct, then the solution would be electromagnetic shielding or frequency modulation to prevent the interference. Sarah confirmed. We need to either block the overlapping fields or shift them to frequencies that don't interfere with each other. Health 9 was already moving to the communication station. I must contact the council immediately. If this theory is correct? Wait, Sarah interrupted. We need proof first. The council won't act on theory alone, especially not from a human. We need to demonstrate that the solution works. She turned to study the facility's layout. How many Vorthak are currently in this building? Approximately 300 patients and 50 staff, Health 9 replied. Perfect test group. Lieutenant Torres, I need you to contact our ship and have them bring down some equipment. We're going to build an electromagnetic field generator to create constructive interference. Basically, we're going to tune your bioneural communications back into harmony. Marcus grinned. Like fixing a radio that's picking up too many stations at once? Exactly like that. As Torres headed back to contact their ship, Kesthul grabbed Sarah's arm weakly. Dr. Chen, if this works, you will have saved not just our species but proven that humanity belongs among the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. Sarah looked around at the dying Vorthak in the medical facility, then at the hope beginning to shine in their eyes. Right now, I just want to save lives. The politics can sort themselves out later. But even as she said it, Sarah knew the politics were already in motion. Success here would change everything for humanity. Failure would doom not only the Vorthak, but any chance her species had of gaining respect among the stars. The real work was about to begin, and they were running out of time. Every day they delayed meant more Vorthak would lose their bioneural connections permanently, even if they could solve the interference problem. Sarah rolled up her sleeves and got to work, determined to prove that sometimes the outsider's perspective was exactly what the galaxy needed. The makeshift laboratory hummed with activity as Sarah and her team worked around the clock to build their electromagnetic field generator. Lieutenant Torres had managed to acquire the necessary components from their ship and nearby salvage yards, while the Vorthak medical staff provided detailed bioneural mapping data. The harmonics are incredibly complex, Dr. Health 9 observed, watching Sarah calibrate the field generator. Despite her weakening condition, she had insisted on helping with the technical work. Each individual Vorthak operates on slightly different frequencies, like fingerprints. Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead, her hands cramped from hours of precise circuit work. That's actually what makes this solvable. If everyone operated on exactly the same frequency, we'd just be amplifying the interference. The variation gives us room to create constructive rather than destructive interference patterns. The device they were building looked more like a human invention than anything seen in galactic medicine. Cobbled together from various technologies, held together with determination and engineering tape. The elegant curves of Vorthak design were replaced by the functional simplicity that characterized human problem-solving. Dr. Kesthul, now confined to a medical bed but still mentally sharp, studied their progress from across the room. Dr. Chen, I must ask, how did your species develop such practical engineering approaches? Most civilizations follow established technological paradigms. Necessity, Sarah replied without looking up from her work. Humans have always had to make do with limited resources. We learned to solve problems with whatever was available, not whatever was ideal. A soft chime indicated someone was entering the medical facility. Sarah looked up to see Ambassador Zethka approaching, his condition visibly worse than when they had last met. Behind him walked an unexpected figure, Shard Prime Luxian of the crystalline hierarchy. Ambassador, Sarah acknowledged, then nodded politely to the crystal being. Shard Prime, I didn't expect council representation here. Luxian's crystalline structure pulsed with cold light. The council has concerns about your experimental approach. Several member species have questioned the wisdom of allowing an untested human to potentially make the Vorthak situation worse. Worse than extinction? Sarah asked pointedly. There are protocols for medical intervention, Luxian continued, ignoring her question. Establish procedures that ensure safety and prevent contamination of other systems. Your improvised methods violate numerous galactic medical standards. Zethka stepped forward, his movement careful and deliberate. Shard Prime, with respect, those same protocols and standards have declared my people incurable. If Dr. Chen offers hope, even uncertain hope, do we not have the right to pursue it? You have the right to pursue approved treatment methods, Luxian replied stiffly. What you do not have the right to do is endanger galactic civilization with untested human technology. Sarah felt her temper rising but kept her voice level. What exactly are you afraid of, Shard Prime? That a human might succeed where your advanced civilizations failed? Or are you more concerned about what that success would mean for the galactic power structure? The tension in the room became palpable. Several Vorthak medical staff had stopped their work to listen, while Lieutenant Torres casually positioned himself near the door, a soldier's instinct to control exit routes during confrontation. Luxian's crystal form flared brighter. I am concerned about reckless experimentation that could spread contamination beyond this system. Your electromagnetic manipulation could interfere with navigation systems, communication networks, even life support systems of visiting ships. Then leave, Sarah said simply. No one is forcing you to stay in the system, but don't condemn an entire species to death because you're afraid of change. Before Luxian could respond, Dr. Health 9 called out weakly from her workstation. The initial calibration is complete. We're ready for the first test. Sarah turned to Zethka. Ambassador, I need to be clear about the risks. This is experimental technology. There's a chance it might not work, or that there could be unforeseen side effects. But without trying, your people will definitely die. Zethka nodded slowly. Dr. Chen, my people are already dying. If there is even a small chance of saving some of us, we must take it. You have my permission to proceed. I formally object to this procedure on behalf of the Galactic Council, Luxian declared. Any negative consequences will be considered an act of aggression by the Terran Republic. Sarah looked at the crystal being with disgust. You're willing to let an entire species die to protect your own political position. That tells me everything I need to know about the Galactic Council's version of civilization. She turned to her team. Everyone clear the testing area. We're starting with minimal power to see if we can detect any effect on the bioneural interference patterns. The field generator was positioned in the center of the medical facility's main ward, where 30 of the most severely affected Vorthak patients lay in various stages of neural breakdown. Most were unconscious. Their dual nervous systems, too, disrupted to maintain awareness. Power at 5%, Torres reported from the control station. Bioneural monitoring active, Health 9 confirmed, her voice growing stronger with excitement. Sarah watched the readouts carefully as electromagnetic fields began emanating from their improvised device. For several minutes, nothing seemed to change. Then, gradually, the chaotic interference patterns on their monitors began to show subtle organization. Power to 10%, Sarah ordered. One of the unconscious patients stirred slightly. Then another. The bioneural interference readings showed clear improvement in the organized wave patterns that indicated healthy Vorthak nervous system function. Dr. Kes Thule struggled to sit up in his bed, his eyes brightening noticeably. I can feel the difference. The constant noise in my neural pathways is diminishing. 15% power, Sarah called out. More patients began showing signs of improvement. Some opened their eyes for the first time in weeks. The bioneural monitoring equipment registered steadily improving connectivity between their dual nervous systems. Shard Prime Luxian observed the proceedings in obvious discomfort, his crystal form pulsing with agitated patterns. This proves nothing. Temporary improvement could be followed by severe complications. 20% power, Sarah announced, ignoring him. Dr. Health 9 gasped audibly as her condition improved dramatically. She stood from her workstation without assistance for the first time in months. The neural pathways are reconnecting. The bioelectric interference is being neutralized by the constructive wave patterns. Around the ward, Vorthak patients were sitting up, speaking for the first time in weeks, embracing family members who had thought them lost forever. The transformation was remarkable and unmistakable. Zethka approached Sarah with tears streaming down his face. "Dr. Chen, you have given my people life where we had only death. How can we ever repay such a gift?" Sarah smiled tiredly. "Help us prove to the galaxy that cooperation works better than politics, and maybe put in a good word for humanity when the council votes on our membership status." Lakshan turned abruptly toward the exit. "The council will hear of this development," he announced coldly. "The full implications must be carefully studied." As the crystal being left, Torres shook his head. "Doc, I think we just made some powerful enemies." "Maybe," Sarah replied, watching the Vorthak patients reconnect with their families around them. "But we also just saved a species from extinction. Sometimes that's worth making enemies." Dr. Kes Thule, now standing and moving normally for the first time in months, approached them with formal dignity. "Dr. Chen, in the name of the Vorthak people, I pledge our eternal friendship to humanity. What you have accomplished here today will be remembered for generations." Sarah looked around at the recovering patients and smiled. "Just remember it, when the council tries to spin this as dangerous human recklessness. Sometimes the best medicine comes from refusing to accept that people have to die." But even as they celebrated their success, Sarah knew the real battle was just beginning. Saving the Vorthak was only the first step. Now they had to survive the political consequences of proving that humanity belonged among the stars. News of the Vorthak recovery spread through the galaxy faster than Sarah had anticipated. Within 48 hours of their successful treatment, communication channels across the galactic network buzzed with reports, analysis, and heated debate about the human solution to the previously incurable plague. Sarah sat in the Vorthak diplomatic quarters aboard the council station, reviewing the flood of incoming messages on her tablet. Some were congratulatory, others skeptical, but a disturbing number were openly hostile. The hegemony of Kaz had issued a formal complaint about unregulated human medical intervention, while the consensus worlds demanded a full investigation into potential side effects. Dr. Chen, Ambassador Zethka entered the room, his movement now fluid and confident after 3 days of treatment. "I bring troubling news from the council chambers." Sarah looked up from her tablet. "Let me guess. They're not happy that a primitive human solved their unsolvable problem." "It's worse than simple wounded pride," Zethka replied, his amber eyes dark with concern. "Several species have united to block any discussion of Terran Council membership. They claim your methods were reckless and potentially dangerous to galactic civilization." Lieutenant Torres, who had been monitoring communication channels from the corner, spoke up. "Doc, we're getting reports that 3 different species have filed formal sanctions against Earth. They're trying to restrict human travel in their systems." Sarah felt her jaw clench. "So we save a dying species and their response is to punish us for it." "There's more," Zethka continued reluctantly. "Shard Prime Lakshan has convinced several council members that the electromagnetic fields you generated could interfere with galactic navigation systems. They're calling for immediate shutdown of all field generators and quarantine of any worlds using your technology." "That's scientifically absurd," Sarah protested. "The field generators operate on completely different frequencies than navigation systems. They can't possibly cause interference." "Scientific accuracy isn't their primary concern," Torres observed grimly. "This is about politics and power." A soft chime indicated another visitor. Dr. Health 9 entered carrying a datapad and wearing the formal robes of a Vorthak scientific representative. Her recovery had been complete and dramatic. She now moved with the grace and energy of someone decades younger than her actual age. "Dr. Chen, I have been asked by the Vorthak Science Council to present you with our complete analysis of the electromagnetic treatment," she announced formally. "Our findings may be useful in the upcoming council hearings." Sarah accepted the datapad and quickly scanned the contents. The report was exhaustive and glowing. Detailed medical scans showed complete restoration of bioneural connectivity in 96% of treated patients, with no negative side effects detected. "This is excellent work," Sarah said. "But will the council accept Vorthak testimony? Aren't we considered biased parties? Zethka and Health 9 exchanged meaningful looks. That is why we have taken additional steps, Zethka explained. We have invited neutral observers from non-aligned species to verify our recovery independently. The Merchants Guild, the Academic Consortium, and even representatives from the neutral zones have agreed to examine our people, Health 9 added. They cannot dismiss multiple independent confirmations. Torres stood up suddenly, his expression alert. Doc, we've got company. Incoming. Looks like a formal council delegation approaching our docking bay. Through the viewport, Sarah could see an impressive array of ships representing multiple species. At the center was the distinctive crystalline vessel of Shard Prime Luxion, surrounded by ships from the hegemony of Cass, the Consensus Worlds, and several other major powers. They're coming to arrest me, aren't they? Sarah asked with resignation. Not arrest, Zethka corrected. But they do carry formal council warrants for immediate termination of your medical experiments and surrender of all related technology. Sarah laughed bitterly. They want me to hand over the cure so they can bury it and let the Vorthak die. After all, that won't happen, Health 9 declared firmly. The Vorthak people will not permit it, and we are not without allies in this matter. Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the communication system activated. Council Chairman Vex Prime Corlith's ancient voice filled the room. Dr. Chen, you are commanded to appear before an emergency council session to answer charges of reckless endangerment of galactic civilization. You will bring all data, technology, and equipment related to your unauthorized medical intervention. Sarah stood up slowly, straightening her uniform. Lieutenant Torres, prepare our ship for immediate departure. Where are we going, Doc? To face the music. But first, we're going to make sure the galaxy hears the whole song. She turned to Zethka and Health 9. I need you to contact every independent news network, every neutral species, every scientific organization that will listen. Make sure they know what really happened here. That humans didn't endanger galactic civilization. We saved it. It will be done, Zethka promised. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in the main council chamber facing a tribunal of the galaxy's most powerful species. The chamber was packed with observers, journalists, and representatives from dozens of civilizations. The tension was so thick it seemed to have physical weight. Shard Prime Luxion stood at the prosecutor's podium, his crystalline form radiating cold authority. Dr. Sarah Chen of the Primitive Terran Republic, you stand accused of conducting unauthorized medical experiments that violated established galactic safety protocols and potentially endangered countless civilizations. The charges are specifically as follows. Continued Click Thane Mordex of the Kaz hegemony. Reckless use of electromagnetic technology, failure to obtain proper medical clearances, contamination of a quarantine system, and theft of proprietary Vorthak biological data. Sarah stepped forward to the defendant's platform. I saved a dying species from extinction using simple electromagnetic field manipulation. If that's a crime in your civilization, then maybe you need to examine your priorities. Your methods were unproven and dangerous, Luxion declared. You could have caused widespread system failures, communication breakdowns, or even more serious biological contamination. But I didn't, Sarah replied firmly. The treatment worked perfectly, with no negative side effects. The Vorthak people are alive and healthy, because someone was willing to try a new approach when the old ones had failed. Council Chairman Corlith raised one of his 6 hands for silence. Dr. Chen, the concern is not about your results but about your methods. Galactic civilization has protocols for medical research to prevent exactly the kind of reckless experimentation you conducted. Sarah looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Your protocols would have let an entire species die rather than risk trying something new. That's not civilization. That's bureaucratic cowardice. The chamber erupted in angry sounds from multiple species. Chairman Corlith called for order, but Sarah wasn't finished. I've spent the last week watching your advanced civilizations debate whether saving lives is worth the political inconvenience. You call humans primitive, but at least we don't condemn people to death because helping them might upset the status quo. Luxion's crystal form flared with indignation. You dare lecture us on civilization when your species has barely left its own solar system. I dare lecture you on basic decency, Sarah shot back. Which apparently doesn't require advanced technology to understand. Chairman Corlith stood slowly, his ancient presence commanding immediate silence. This tribunal will recess for deliberation. Dr. Chen, you will remain in custody pending our decision. As council security moved to escort her away, Sarah looked back at the assembled delegates. The Vorthak people are alive because humanity refused to let them die. Remember that when you're deciding our fate. The chamber doors closed behind her, but Sarah could still hear the heated debates beginning inside. The real battle for humanity's place in the galaxy was just getting started. The detention facility aboard the council station was surprisingly comfortable for a prison cell. Sarah sat on the simple bunk, reviewing the data pad that Health 9 had managed to smuggle to her through Lieutenant Torres. The independent verification reports were everything she had hoped for. 12 different neutral species had confirmed the complete recovery of the Vorthak population with no detectable side effects. But as she read through the political analysis that Torres had included, her heart sank. Despite the overwhelming evidence of success, the major powers were doubling down on their opposition to humanity. They had too much invested in maintaining the existing galactic order to allow a newcomer species to upset their carefully balanced power structure. The cell door opened with a soft hiss, and Sarah was surprised to see Ambassador Zeth Ka enter, followed by an individual she didn't recognize. A tall, ethereal being with translucent skin and forearms, wearing the robes of the academic consortium. Dr. Chen, Zeth Ka said formally, I present Professor Eth Q of the academic consortium's xenobiology department. She has requested to speak with you. Professor Eth Q moved with fluid grace as she approached. Dr. Chen, I have spent considerable time reviewing your treatment methodology and results. I must say your approach represents a fascinating paradigm shift in interspecies medical intervention. Thank you, Professor, Sarah replied cautiously, though I suspect you're not here just to discuss my research methods. Perceptive, ETHQ, acknowledged. I am here because the academic consortium has made a troubling discovery. The major council powers are not simply opposing your methods, they are actively suppressing similar breakthrough research from other species. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Professor Aithku produced a data crystal from her robes. Over the past 50 years, at least 17 different species have proposed revolutionary medical, technological, or scientific advances. All were rejected by the Council on various pretexts: safety concerns, insufficient testing, violation of established protocols. But that's how progress works, Sarah protested. New ideas always challenge established thinking. Exactly, ETHQ replied, which is precisely why they were suppressed. The current council structure benefits from technological stagnation. It maintains the power balance that keeps the major civilizations in control. Zeth Ka's expression darkened. You're saying the council deliberately prevents scientific advancement? Not prevents, controls, the professor corrected. All major breakthroughs must come from approved research institutions, which are controlled by the major powers. Independent innovation, especially from newer or smaller species, is systematically eliminated. Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing the small cell. So my real crime wasn't endangering galactic civilization. It was proving that outsiders can solve problems the establishment couldn't. Your success represents an existential threat to their authority, ETHQ confirmed. If a human can solve an impossible medical crisis, what does that say about the superiority of the established powers? What other impossible problems might be solvable by fresh perspectives? The cell door opened again, and Lieutenant Torres entered with obvious urgency. Doc, we've got a situation developing. Multiple news networks across the galaxy are picking up the story, and it's not the version the Council wants people to hear. He activated his portable display, showing news feeds from dozens of different species. The headlines were telling. Human saves entire species. While Council debates, Vorthak recovery challenges Galactic Medical Authority. Independent verification confirms human breakthrough. The story is spreading faster than they can contain it, Torres continued. And it's not just news networks. Scientists, medical professionals, and researchers from across the galaxy are coming forward with their own stories of suppressed research. Professor Ithku nodded grimly. The academic consortium has been quietly documenting these cases for decades. Your success has given us the catalyst we needed to bring them into the open. Sarah studied the news feeds with growing amazement. Species she had never heard of were publishing research that had been buried for years. New energy sources, faster-than-light communication methods, revolutionary agricultural techniques, and dozens of other advances that could have transformed galactic civilization. Why now? Sarah asked. Why are they all coming forward at once? Because you proved it could work, Zethka explained. For the first time, someone challenged the Council's authority and won. You gave hope to everyone who had been silenced. Torres pulled up another data stream. Doc, you need to see this. Earth has been getting official communications from over 30 different species requesting formal diplomatic relations. They want to establish direct scientific and cultural exchanges with humanity, bypassing the Council entirely. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the implications. They're creating an alternative to the Council system. Not creating, Professor Ithku corrected, revealing what already existed. The Council represents only the major powers, but there are hundreds of species in the galaxy who have been marginalized or ignored. Your success has shown them that cooperation works better than subjugation. A new alarm sounded throughout the detention facility. Torres checked his communication device and his expression grew serious. We've got major ships arriving in the system. Looks like the big powers are mobilizing their fleets. Through the small viewport in her cell, Sarah could see the distant lights of approaching vessels, the sleek predatory shapes of Kaz hegemony warships, the geometric precision of crystalline hierarchy battlecruisers, and the organic curves of Consensus World's defense fleets. They're not here for a diplomatic solution, Sarah observed. Zeth Kai stood with sudden determination. Dr. Chen, the Vorthak people will not permit you to be silenced or imprisoned. You saved our entire species. We will not abandon you to Council politics. What can you do against the combined fleets of the major powers? Sarah asked. More than you might think, Professor Ithku replied. The academic consortium maintains defensive partnerships with over 200 species. The Merchants Guild controls most of the galaxy's trade routes. The neutral zones have significant military resources, and now, thanks to your example, they're all willing to act. Torres was monitoring multiple communication channels simultaneously. Doc, I'm picking up fleet movements from all over the sector. This isn't just about the Council anymore. It's becoming a galaxy-wide confrontation between the old order and everyone they've been suppressing. Sarah looked around at the faces of her unlikely allies. A grateful alien ambassador, an academic rebel, and a human soldier who had followed her into impossible circumstances. I just wanted to save some lives. How did it turn into a galactic revolution? Because sometimes, Zethka said with quiet intensity, saving lives requires changing everything else too. The lights in the detention facility flickered as massive ships passed overhead. Through the viewport, Sarah could see the Council station's defensive systems activating, while in the distance, hundreds of ships from dozens of species were taking positions for what could become the largest confrontation in galactic history. Professor, Sarah said finally, what exactly are we fighting for? The right to solve problems without permission, Ithku replied. The freedom to help each other without bureaucratic approval. The chance to build a galaxy based on cooperation instead of control. Sarah nodded slowly. Then let's make sure we win. But as she watched the fleet formations maneuvering in the darkness of space, she wondered if her simple act of compassion had started something that would either transform the galaxy or tear it apart. The standoff in space lasted for 3 tense days. Sarah watched from her detention cell as more ships arrived hourly, not just military vessels, but civilian transports, research ships, medical vessels, and commercial freighters. The galaxy was choosing sides and the lines were becoming clear. On one side stood the traditional powers, the crystalline hierarchy, the Kaz hegemony, the Consensus Worlds, and their client states. Their position was simple: maintain order, preserve established protocols, and prevent dangerous precedents that could destabilize galactic civilization. On the other side was an unprecedented coalition of previously marginalized voices: the Academic Consortium, the Merchants Guild, the Neutral Zones, dozens of smaller species, and now, surprisingly, even some breakaway factions from the major powers themselves. "Doc," Lieutenant Torres reported during one of his visits, "Earth just received a formal request from the Coalition. They want humanity to be the founding member of something they're calling the Cooperative Scientific Alliance." Sarah looked up from the medical journals she had been studying. What exactly would that mean? Free exchange of scientific knowledge, cooperative research projects, mutual aid agreements, and most importantly, no central authority that can suppress innovation, Torres explained. It's everything the Council claims to be, but isn't. Professor Iwao. Ithku entered the cell, her translucent features animated with excitement. "Dr. Chen, the response to our data releases has exceeded all expectations. Research institutions across the galaxy are sharing suppressed studies. The scientific advancement in just 3 days has been extraordinary." She activated a holographic display showing a flood of new discoveries. Faster-than-light communication that didn't rely on expensive relay networks, agricultural techniques that could feed entire systems, energy generation methods that were both efficient and environmentally safe, and medical treatments that rivaled or exceeded anything in the Council's restricted databases. All of this knowledge existed, Sarah marveled. It was just being suppressed. The major powers maintained their control by ensuring that only they had access to advanced technology, Ithku explained. By suppressing independent research, they kept other species dependent on their systems. Ambassador Zethka arrived with urgent news. "Dr. Chen, the Council has issued an ultimatum. All ships in the Coalition fleet must withdraw within 12 hours, or they will be considered hostile forces subject to military action." Sarah stood up, her mind racing. "They're going to start a war over this." "Perhaps," Zethka acknowledged. "But there is another possibility. The Coalition leadership has asked me to present you with a proposal." He handed her a formal document written in multiple languages. As Sarah read through it, her eyes widened with surprise. "They want me to address the entire galaxy directly? A simultaneous broadcast to every system, every species, every world," Zethku confirmed. "The Merchants Guild controls enough communication infrastructure to make it possible. Your message would reach billions of beings across the galaxy." Torres grinned. "Doc, you'd be speaking to more people at once than any human in history." Sarah felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. "What am I supposed to say that could possibly prevent a galactic war?" "The truth," said a new voice from the doorway. Dr. Health 9 entered, followed by representatives Sarah didn't recognize, beings from species she had only read about in xenobiology texts. "Dr. Chen," Health 9 continued, "I bring greetings from the Recovered Worlds Coalition, 37 different species who have benefited from suppressed medical research that we've been sharing over the past 3 days. One of the new arrivals, a methane-breathing being in an environmental suit, spoke through a translator. Dr. Chen, my people have suffered from a genetic disorder for centuries. The cure existed in academic consortium databases but was classified as potentially disruptive to established medical paradigms. Thanks to your example, we implemented the treatment yesterday. My children will live normal lives." Another representative, a plant-like being with flowing fronds for arms, added their voice. "Our agricultural crisis was solved using techniques developed by the Neutral Zones 50 years ago. The Council buried the research because it would have disrupted the major powers' control of food distribution." More stories followed. Energy. Crises solved with suppressed technology. Communication problems resolved with forbidden research. Medical conditions cured with hidden knowledge. Each tale painted the same picture. The galaxy was full of solutions that had been deliberately hidden to maintain artificial scarcity and control. Sarah looked around at the diverse group of beings who had come to thank her for something she had never intended to start. "I just wanted to save the Vorthak people," And in doing so, you saved all of us, Health 9 said gently. You proved that compassion and cooperation can overcome bureaucracy and control. Torres checked his chronometer. Doc, the coalition is ready to broadcast whenever you are, but we're running out of time before the council's ultimatum expires. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. Patch me through to the galaxy. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in the coalition's main communications center, facing a complex array of transmission equipment that would carry her words to every inhabited system in known space. Around her, beings from dozens of species worked frantically to coordinate the massive broadcast. We're live in 30 seconds, announced the chief communications officer, a multi-armed being from the Merchants Guild. Sarah looked directly into the primary camera, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment: the dying Vorthak, the suppressed research, the artificial scarcities that had been imposed on countless worlds. Beings of the galaxy, she began when the transmission light activated. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm speaking to you from the Coalition fleet near the Council station. 3 weeks ago, I was told that an entire species was doomed to extinction because their medical condition was incurable. Today, every member of that species is alive and healthy, because sometimes the impossible is only impossible until someone tries a different approach. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Over the past few days, we've learned that the Vorthak weren't the only ones suffering from artificially imposed limitations. Across the galaxy, solutions to countless problems have been suppressed, hidden or forbidden because they threaten the power structure that benefits a few at the expense of many. The transmission equipment indicated that response signals were coming in from systems across the galaxy. Billions of beings were listening. The choice before us isn't between order and chaos, Sarah continued. It's between a system that hoards knowledge to maintain control and one that shares knowledge to solve problems. It's between artificial scarcity imposed by politics and natural abundance created by cooperation. She looked directly into the camera, speaking to every being in the galaxy as if they were sitting across from her. Humanity is new to galactic civilization, but we've learned something important in our short history. The most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or military might. It's the simple refusal to accept that people have to suffer when solutions exist. The response signals were increasing dramatically as her words spread across the galaxy. Today, the old powers demand that we choose between submission and war. But there's a third option. We can choose to build something better. A galaxy where scientific knowledge belongs to everyone, where medical treatments aren't restricted by politics, where cooperation replaces control. Sarah took one final breath. Humanity stands with everyone who believes that saving lives matters more than preserving power structures. We invite you to join us in proving that the galaxy's greatest strength isn't in its weapons or its barriers, but in its willingness to help each other survive and thrive. As the transmission ended, alerts began flooding the communication center. Ships throughout the galaxy were declaring support for the coalition. Planets were withdrawing from council authority. Research institutions were opening their databases to universal access. In just 30 minutes, Dr. Sarah Chen had accidentally started a galactic revolution. And for the first time since this all began, she allowed herself to believe it might actually work. The old galaxy was ending. What they built next would depend on whether compassion could truly overcome politics among the stars.